It's very difficult to put together a symposium and an exhibition of this, caliber. And we're very thankful for support of institutions such as Hunter College for housing us here graciously. And the exhibition was made possible by the general support of Prisa Santillana, Mercantil, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mexican Agency for International Development Cooperation, the National Council of Culture and the Arts, CONACULTA, the National Institute of Fine Arts, IMBA, and the Mexican Cultural Institute of New York, Jaime and Raquel Gilinski, Mexam Cultural Foundation, Grupo Diarc, furthermore, a program of the J.M. Kaplan Fund for the catalog, Colección Patricia Cisneros for the symposium, and Hotel Americano. The exhibition and the symposium are also supported in part by an award from the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council of the Arts, with the support of the Governor Andrew Cuomo and the New York State Legislature, and the Public Fund from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. I want to read something that I wrote for the catalog, because I think these are our ideas that have been, obsessing us. This group of people who are graciously collaborating with this curatorial team. And I have to say that this venture started in 2011 at Bard College when Jorge Rivas decided to organize a symposium on design, and he had the good idea to invite Cecilia Losquiavo and Elena Mayet and himself to, Natalia Magluf, who's not here, to talk about, issues of production of design and also networkings among Latin American countries. So I suggested them to do an exhibition at the America Society, using this comparative template of, 3 countries that had many, many aspects in common that people did not know, and also to organize a symposium with people who could, relate to these issues. So design contributes a valuable complex activity for studying and interpreting a portion of the region's creativity through functional, utilitarian, and aesthetic objects that were not necessarily conceived as works of art. With a few exceptions of Sergio Rodriguez, Joaquim Tenreiro, Clara Porcet, Lina Bobardi, and Michael Van Buren, there has not been an examination of the contribution of many of these designers and artists to the international tendencies in design in their struggle to project their difference and their subaltern contribution. Little is known outside specialist circles in Brazil and Venezuela of utopian experiments like those of the Catholic cooperative Unilabor, founded in Sao Paulo by the artist Geraldo de Barros and the priest João Baptista Pereira dos Santos, or in the furniture company Tecoteca, founded in Caracas by the Dutch-born Venezuelan artist Cornelis Sidman and the Carbonell brothers. It would appear that the weight of non-modern, informal elements upon our societies, combined with the heterogeneity of contexts and the historical differences among the nations making up the region, has discouraged any attempt to develop a historiographical discourse on the global importance of modern design in Latin America. I wonder if this marginalization is due to the design's spurious nature, or whether it reveals, rather, a conscious or unconscious reluctance to trace romantic nationalist links with regard to artisanal and traditional practices that entail unavoidable appropriations of or crossings with popular culture. One of the most problematic and interesting aspects of design in Latin America has been precisely the incorporation and sometimes the instrumentalization of popular elements and the use of vernacular imagery in the fabrication of objects and furniture on abstract lines as a function of the development of modern infrastructures. It is at this point of inflection that the potent field appears magnetized by the contradictions, struggles, and antagonisms that anticipated gaps and ruptures in the modernization processes, which the designer and architect Lina Bobardi critically identified in industrial design used as a regenerative force of the entire system. For the purpose of examining design from a revisionary standpoint, delimited by the domestic sphere, which is the case here, during the modernization processes in Brazil, Mexico, and Venezuela, it is important to begin by recovering the idea of Silvia Fernandez, who identified the appearance of a pragmatics of design in Latin America in the projects of accelerated infrastructure that took shape at different moments of this modernization. While important designers emerged in Peru, Cuba, Colombia, countries that with fewer resources and agrarian economic structures, the apogee of design in the 20th century was achieved in nations that were economically robust or with sudden rises in economic prosperity, such as Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Mexico, Uruguay, and Venezuela. Sooner or later, depending on the case, it was during this modernizing period, driven by different versions of the local nationalisms, that ambitious economic plans were elaborated through the implementation of publicly oriented infrastructural programs, with the prospects of obtaining a growth that aspired of being inscribed into a universalist scheme. These ambitious initiatives, now distant in the memory of many people, also included significant contributions from distinguished design and architecture professionals and artists who emigrated from Europe and to a lesser degree from the United States to various regional metropolises, fleeing war or in search for a better work opportunities. Beginning in the 40s, there began to appear a substantial increase in the production of objects commonly relegated to the field of design, and intimately linked to the idea of progress that frequently underpin the international tendencies in vogue, as well as the need for technical actualization in countries like Brazil, Mexico, and Venezuela. On the other hand, the wave of massive internal migration of hundreds of millions of people from impoverished and rural areas to cities like Mexico City, Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Caracas, not only radically changed the spatial configuration of those cities, but also dictated the need to produce new labor markets, housing infrastructure, health and public education systems, and goods and services compatible with the constant demographic changes that these migratory movements produce. To this spectrum was added the rise of a professional middle class and a large urban proletariat enclosed in favelas or shantytowns in countries whose social structures have been highly stratified since colonial times. When Lucio Costa, Oscar Niemeyer, Carlos Raúl de Villanueva, Tomás Sanabria, Juan O'Gorman, Mario Pani, Pedro Ramírez Vázquez, and Félix Candela, among many others, obtained public and private commissions to build houses, churches, and buildings, as well as plans for important infrastructural urban projects, they needed designers to elaborate future accessories and materials for the interiors of those new spaces that aim to change the habits and mentality of citizens with the goal of adapting them to Western standards of living and consumption. It has been estimated that the design boom in Latin America and the pedagogical institutions dedicated to that discipline that proliferated in several countries of the region between the 50s and the 60s reached its height with the emergence of different regulatory public agendas of import policies in favor of incentives to local industries, production, and the elaboration of locally inflected economic development projects of varying ideological stripes that arose in those decades. In the post-war years, which coincided chronologically with the beginning of the Cold War, design reached a clear-cut maturity that generated a theoretical practical apparatus that crystallized in Pedro Ramírez Vázquez's rural schools the co-founder of the Argentine concrete movement, Tomás Maldonado's pedagogical administration of the Ulm School of Design, and Lina Bobardi's later critical positions in her quest for the organic integration of design with popular culture and nature, prompted by her experimental works made in Salvador de Bahia. Recognition is owed to lesser-known contributions by important figures such as Clara Porcet and Miguel Arroyo, who, like their Brazilian colleagues, advocated for the use of local materials and the exploration of cultural references extracted from their context. It is also worth mentioning Tecla Tofano's singular and pioneering gender ars politica in ceramics, which, according to Marta Traba, worked against the smooth and well-finished, just as later she would work against prettiness. She works on a social concept, against the void of the purist aesthetic. For this symposium, we want to bring Moderno into an investigative line of inquiry formulated by the curatorial team, as we did with the book. We suppose the book will be ready in 1 month and a half. The word moderno, as Jorge Rivas recalled, both in Spanish and Portuguese, has been associated with ideas of novelty and rapid development, operating as a lingua franca that led to the path to the future. The home, or in broader sense, the domestic sphere, is a place considered in this project as a receptacle in which converge a set of ideas in dialogue with the different local contexts, their traditions, methodologies of manufacture, local techniques and materials. The publication accompanying Moderno will address these issues, and I hope that you can come to the launching as soon as we can organize something for that. Design channeled the empirical flow of the practice of Latin American architects in their struggle to develop their own vocabularies in their countries. This collaboration was not always very happy, but included the manufacture of artifacts for economic and intellectual elites that encompassed the production of more affordable, simpler, if you will, objects and products for the popular sectors. But it did not succeed in establishing a horizontal logic of production and sustainable consumption that would involve everybody equally. Nevertheless, there was important interdisciplinary collaboration among artists, architects, and designers in which there occurred an inclusion of the creative process of women who, in media, traditionally averse to women's work, would dedicate themselves professionally to designing objects, furniture, or the quiet modeling of functional pottery and non-utilitarian ceramics, as entering as into a Trojan horse in the male-dominated terrain of the museum in Venezuela, for instance. For the latter, we can attest the lithic force of Seca Severin de Tullas ceramics or Cristina Merchant's masterly experiments with nooks and hollowness. The reserved, discreet performance of modern design in Latin America is frequently confused with a servile obedience to international standards of taste and style. Nevertheless, this symposium, the publication, and the exhibition aim to refute this misunderstanding perpetuated by the ignorance of a productive field by means of a reflection that moves away from the set of objects that still successfully sets off reverberations of the utopian impulse of its time and its difference into a multinational, deterritorialized era without the ambition of the originality possessed by the artworks. Thank you. I wanted to start this symposium with a very compelling work by a contemporary artist who is reflecting the process of design as a process that it's based on copy, appropriation, and you know, the transferring of the property. Jill Magid made this wonderful piece, and I saw it in a gallery, and I think it's very pertinent to have it, as it includes three key agents in this narrative: Barragan, Albers, and Clara Porcet. So please, let's enjoy Jill Magid's video, and she will say a very brief comment about her operation. Thank you, Jill.
Hi, I want to thank Gabriela and everyone for having me. Many of you I've been researching a lot, so it's exciting to be in the same room with you all. To stay brief, I'll just say I've been working on a project largely called the Barragan Archives, and please excuse my accent. And I've been very interested in Luis Barragan's archive, how it was split into a personal archive and a professional archive by his will, very beautifully by way of a door in his house. He said, everything on this side of my door in my house is my personal archive with my library, and everything on that side of my door is the professional archive. By a series of events, the professional archive and all of the rights to it, as well as all of the sanctioned photographs of it by Armando Salas Portugal, were purchased by Vitra, Swiss furniture company, who very strongly enforces all of the copyrights on those works and images, whereas his personal archive and library are run by a fundación in Mexico that gave me full access to that archive, whereas up until this time I'm still not been allowed to go visit the professional archive. So I've been doing a lot of work about copyright and the issues that Gabriela was pointing out. And through a series of events, I got introduced to Joseph Albers through Barragan, because in the living room of Barragan's house in Casa Barragan, over the fascistol, which is the wooden sculptural piece that he puts photographs and images on, above that hangs a painting by Joseph Albers that in photographs by Armando Salas Portugal you would assume is one of his famous homages to the square. But it turns out it's not a real Joseph Albers painting. It's not even a painting. It's a print on fabric, and according to the Albers Foundation, it's not even a fake because it's not even a painting. So I was very interested in here of a situation where authenticity and rights are such a big deal, that there's this fake that Barragan and both Albers knew was not real, but because they had such a mutual respect, had no problem with there being a fake, or not even a fake, an object that looks like a fake. And so I was visiting the Albers Foundation doing works about that, and after I was doing works with the paintings, I walked into the library in the Albers Foundation, and there was a butaca chair by Luis Barragan. And so I said, wow, why do you guys have a chair by Barragan? And they're like, that's a Joseph Albers chair. And I was like, really? I don't think so. And it turns out that it is. That Barragan, that Albers was, obviously many of you know, a huge fan of Mexico and used to go there quite often with his wife Annie, and they were very close with Clara Porcet. And one time, as the story goes, Albers and Joseph and Annie were in Clara's studio and saw Clara's version of the butaca chair, which is often attributed to Luis Barragan, even by Vitra, but it's really, I think, by Clara Porcet, such as the gender issues go. Poor Clara was not attributed to often. So anyways, Albers sees the chair and falls so in love with the chair that he asks Clara if he can copy it. And Clara, having no issues with copyright, says, of course. So Albers traced Clara Porcet's chair. And when I found that out, I went back to the Albers Foundation and I traced Albers' chair. So this is the video of the process of me doing that. It's called Tracing Albers Chair. It's 4 minutes and 58 seconds. And one thing I'll say, it's usually shown, I mean, it's always shown more as an object in a large screen that gets put on the floor. So it's not generally meant to be screened in this way, but more like objectified. But here it is.